Okay, Year 11, welcome to your video tutorial for 8.1.1, the social context of software design. The second subheading under that, inclusivity. So this dot point is looking again at the social and ethical issues of, the social context of design. Last dot point, we had a look at ergonomics, how to make an ergonomic piece of software, particularly in relation to your user interface. This dot point is looking at inclusivity. So yes, my UI might be ergonomic, but also I have to make sure it is inclusive for anyone who will particularly use it. So the big question, and this is what you hear a lot of the time from poor developers, is, yeah, what's wrong? The UI is fine, it works for me, what's your problem? And it's that very insular or very narrow view that gets a lot of software developers into a bit of strife, yeah? So really, you're not the only one as the developer using the UI. A range of people could be using your particular piece of software through that user interface, so you have to consider all types of users. It is actually a responsibility, and in Year 12 we'll look at the responsibilities of software designers, but it is a responsibility of software developers to design inclusive software. That can be inclusive for a number of individual characteristics or, general groups of people. So there's 4 particular areas or domains that we're going to look at. They are cultural backgrounds, so being inclusive of cultural backgrounds, economic backgrounds, gender and disability. So in terms of cultural backgrounds, the thing that you have to understand about inclusivity is people using your UI will likely be from a range of different cultural backgrounds. So there should be options within your user interface or your software to customize the language. You see that a lot of the time, be it as something as simple as an ATM machine. You can change the language to fit, something that will be more easily accessible for you. An easy one to forget is a date format. So here in Australia, we format the date differently from different people around the world. So you have to have an option to customize date formats. And also, I know it sounds odd, but, name fields. And classically in Western countries, you have something like a Christian name and a last name, or a first name and a last name. That's not always the case. Also capping, typically, we don't go above, say, 15 characters, but you need to be able to consider that different people around the world have different needs, and they might not necessarily be able to fit their name simply within 15 characters. Beyond customizing and allowing for, multiple different types of input, you need to consider content as well. Just because something is generally accepted, in the Western world where you may be creating your piece of software in your UI, doesn't necessarily mean it to be acceptable somewhere else. So, the imagery you're using, the language that you're using in your UI has to be considered for a range of different cultural backgrounds. In terms of economic backgrounds, it's pretty straightforward. Really what it's trying to get at is that your software should generally be able to be affordable for most of the market. You shouldn't cut anyone really out from purchasing your software. It's not saying you need to make your software at $2, but acceptable market prices for things. And this should be considered in your development process and your use of what particular resources to make sure at the end, you can sell your software while still making a profit and it still be able to be accessible generally to most of the public. So in terms of gender, there's, 2 kind of different elements here. The social context of software design. Typically, within the software development industry, it's been a predominantly male-dominated area. That has been changing thanks to a range of initiatives in the last 10 years. So, as a female software developer, I, for a long time, have been, a bit of a minority, but that is slowly changing. So it is, the responsibility of the market to make sure, in terms of gender, from one point of view, from a social context, that women are given equal opportunities within this industry, but also in terms of gender and in terms of developing, a piece of software that is considerate of different genders. You know, in recent years, changes to society mean that, you know, gender is now considered more than just binary, more than just male and female. And it's important as developers that, you know, we align ourselves with what is generally accepted by society, regardless of our own personal, religious beliefs. Yep. So as software developers, while we definitely can hold those beliefs, and those beliefs are definitely valid, yep, we do have to align ourselves and align our software with what is generally accepted. And finally, the last one is disability. So in terms of disability, really the three domains are visual disabilities, hearing disabilities, and, you know, physical disabilities. Most of what this has to do with is allowing multiple modes for input. So if you have a visual disability, you know, that may not be total blindness, but allowing for, you know, customization to have larger fonts. You know, in terms of dual messages, you may have, you know, a visual, as say a hyperlink, that's usually the most common example, that's in bright blue, but, you know, you have to have, if you have, for people with visual impediments, you know, you have to have that also underlined, or, you know, in some other way, say, for example, they were colorblind. Yeah, that blue hyperlink isn't really going to help them. Having that underlined as well or in bold as well really helps highlight that. They're just small little things to consider within your UI, but also for, you know, people who may be fully blind, text to speech or text to language options, allowing for, you know, your user to engage with your particular UI, allowing that text to actually come out as an audio output will allow them to engage with your particular piece of software. And, you know, the same for hearing, visual feedback, not just sound. I know some of the time when we perform some kind of function within a piece of software, the feedback that we get is a sound, like you know, a positive ding, something like that. Having visual feedback, you know, a message box also appears saying this was successful. It's just about really considering the different types of users that might be using your system. Finally, in terms of physical disabilities, allowing for multiple input devices. OSK stands for on-screen keyboard, you know, for people who might have issues using normal keyboards, and then speech to text. So, you know, allowing your user to say something that where they might not necessarily be able to type. So, you know, they're just all considerations or social considerations you really should have when developing a piece of inclusive software. And that's it, guys. It's a pretty short dot point. That's inclusivity.